The Kindle Basic and the Kobo Nia are both the most affordable entry-level Kindles and Kobos you can buy, and either one will get you the ability to read more books, but at the end of the day, there are some differences you should be aware of. In this video, we're doing a deep dive comparison to see which one will give you more bang for your buck. Hi there, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. My name is Maneetpaul Singh. On this channel, we discuss different tools and techniques available to read books more effectively so we can live a more intentional life. If that sounds like something you're interested in, consider pressing the subscribe button down below. Now let's start by talking about the Kobo Nia. The price for this device is $100. It has no customization options whatsoever. It has an 8GB storage, it has no color options, and has no support for audiobooks. So really, this is only one version you can get. There's no customization available. When you compare that over to the Kindle side, they do have a bit more customization. They do have the same 8GB model for the Kindle Basic, but you do have the color option of black or white, and you do have Audible support through Bluetooth headphones. You can't really store many audiobooks at one time, but you do have that Bluetooth support built in. One other thing that I find really frustrating though is the Kindle Basic has this option for special offers or not. Basically, it's their code way of saying ads on your screensaver. If you don't want to see Amazon ads on your screensaver, you have to pay $20 extra, and that actually brings the price to $110 versus $100 of the Kobo Nia. Now, in terms of build quality, both these devices are basically the same. They're both made out of plastic, both on the front and the back. The Kobo Nia has this texture design on the back, just like all the other Kobos. I don't really like it too much. It makes it much easier for crumbs and dust to get stuck in there. The Amazon Kindle does not have that textured back, but both these devices, because they're made of plastic, are very prone to fingerprints. From my experience, it feels like the Kindle does get more fingerprints than the Kobo does because the black color they use is a bit more glossy compared to the Kobo plastic, but it really doesn't matter. They both get fingerprints no matter how hard you try. One thing I also noticed is the Kindle does seem to have a more rounded shape to it, whereas the Kobo feels much more boxy. The corners on the Kindle are more rounded, which is much nicer, I think, similar to like an Apple product where they're having the rounded corners lately. The Kobo is still rounded, but not as much as the Kindle. One thing they both do have in common though is the front display. Neither of them are a flush design. The display is slightly synced into the front of the display. There's no glass covering it. It's just a display right on the front with no flush design. I don't know if it's just me, but the Kindle does seem to be a bit more flat compared to the Kobo, meaning it's not as noticeable on the Kindle. On the Kobo, you can definitely tell it's not a flush design. On the Kindle, you can definitely still tell, but it's not as bad as the Kobo. In terms of functionality though, that does not make a difference whatsoever. They both don't get much glare, but if you put under a light bulb, you will see some glare no matter how hard you try. So again, the display on both these devices is basically a draw. When it comes to the ports and buttons on the device, neither device has page turn buttons, so you aren't really getting anything there. The power button on the device is different though. The Kindle Paperwhite has a nice power button on the bottom. The location's a bit weird, but the button itself is very nice. It feels very clicky. I like that a lot. On the Kobo, the power button is really hard to press. It's much more flat. You have to put some more pressure and use your fingernail to get in there sometimes. But the micro USB port is the same on both devices, which is a bit annoying. I really wish in 2021 we would be seeing USB-C by now, but both these devices have micro USB. Now let's spend a bit of time talking about the screen on both these devices. This is the biggest difference between the Kindle mid-tier options and the lower end Kindles. Same as well on the Kobo side. The display is not nearly as good as the higher end models. With that being said, let's talk about the Kobo for a second. The brightness on this Kobo seems to get higher than the Kindle Basic brightness does. It's also much easier to adjust the brightness on the Kobo software as a whole. They have this nifty little shortcut. When you're reading, you just drag up and down on the left side of the screen. On the Kindle, if you want to adjust the brightness, you have to do so manually by going into the settings and pressing the slider buttons over here. software. It's not the biggest deal in the world, but I will say the Kobo software is nicer to use because of this small shortcut. Now the resolution of both these displays is slightly different. The Kindle Basic is 167 ppi resolution, whereas the Kobo Nia has 227. It's not the biggest difference in terms of comparing both these side by side. The resolution definitely is not the best. It's still very blurry at points to read, and you stare at it for a minute, you can really tell it's not that crisp compared to your phone or the higher end Kindles and Kobos. I wouldn't call this a deal breaker, but obviously you're buying this device to read every single day. It's probably worth investing a little extra money to get one of the higher models that has a solid 300 ppi resolution. That is a standard for all the newer models. I don't think it's worth getting either of these devices for this reason alone. But I won't call that a deal breaker if you don't care about resolution and all you care about is functionality. Both these devices can still read books just fine. You're just not going to get that crispy resolution. Now, neither of these devices have warm light control, but on the Kobo side, if you get the one model up, the Clara HD, you do get warm light control. On the Kindle side, you have to upgrade to the Kindle Oasis to get that warm light. So that's one thing to note. If you do care about that resolution and that warm temperature control, you're probably better off investing that extra 20 to 30 bucks to get the Clara HD. One other thing I want to note while we're on this topic though is the Kindle itself in general seems to have a warmer backlight compared to the Kobo. So again, neither of these have the warm temperature control, but their natural backlight, it seems to be warmer tinted on the Kindle compared to the Kobo. I actually prefer that quite a bit. When you put these side by side, you can see that small difference. It's more comfortable to read on the Kindle. Now, in terms of the speed and performance of both these devices, the Kobo has a 900 megahertz processor with 256 megabytes of RAM. The Kindle Basic has 1 gigahertz processor and 512 megabytes of RAM, but it's very, very clear the Kobo, even though it has slower hardware specs, is much faster and much snappier to use compared to the Kindle Basic. I've mentioned this before in my other videos, and I have to say it again. Kobo does an excellent job with their software optimization. It just makes it feel so much snappier to use. On the Kindle, you'll definitely see a bit of slowness when using it. On the Kobo, even though the hardware is not as good, you are still getting a much snappier performance. At the end of the day, both these devices accomplish the goal of reading more books more effectively. You get all the features on the device the same as you normally expect on any other e-reader. The device itself is basically the same. The only difference that you're going to get is in terms of the software and the ecosystem. The Kobo side is more designed from a minimalist perspective. You are not getting some key features that I would personally be using, such as support for the Readwise integration, and also the bookstore on the Kobo is a bit more limited. On the Kindle side, however, you're getting a much slower software experience compared to the Kobo. The UI is a bit more clunky to use, but you are getting a lot more flexibility. You have that Readwise integration, and you also have the Kindle bookstore, which just cannot be beat. Which one do you think is better, the Kobo Nia or the Kindle Basic? Leave a comment down below. Also in the description below, I have affiliate links for both these devices. If you decide to buy using the link, it will support my channel. Thank you in advance for doing that. If you enjoyed this video, check out my video comparing the Kobo and Kindle ecosystem. Link for that on the screen right now. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.